This Christmas should have been special. Instead, all I got was a cold, indifferent text from my mother. Isabella, everyone's staying home due to the ice storm. Christmas dinner is cancelled. Stay safe, dear. I stared at my phone, disappointment tightening in my chest. I had long grown used to being sidelined in my family, but this time, something felt different. Though disheartened, I convinced myself that my mother was simply being cautious. Winters in Nashville could be treacherous. Icy roads, dangerous travel conditions. Maybe she was just looking out for me, right? I put my phone down, trying to salvage some holiday spirit despite the ache in my chest. Cup of hot chocolate, a few Christmas movies. Maybe I could still enjoy the day in my own way. But how was I supposed to feel warmth when I knew that I should have been with my family? I used to dream of a cozy Christmas like everyone else, sitting around the dinner table sharing stories and laughter, but reality had never been that kind to me. At 3 p.m., I scrolled through Instagram absent-mindedly, searching for a distraction. But the moment I saw the first photo, it felt like a knife had been driven straight into my heart. A perfect family Christmas. So blessed to have loved ones around. Below the caption was a picture of my entire family gathered around a beautifully decorated dinner table at Sophia's house. Everyone was there. My mother, my father, my aunts, uncles, cousins, smiling, laughing, raising their glasses as if this were the happiest day of the year. Froze. An ice storm. There was no sign of one. Through the window in the background, I could see clear blue skies, sunlight casting golden light over the street where Sophia lived. There was no snow, no blizzard, nothing that would have prevented me from being there. My hands trembled as I swiped through more photos. My father carving the turkey. My mother arranging her signature Christmas cookies. My little nieces and nephews unwrapping presents beneath the towering Christmas tree. The table was set with festive decor. The fireplace crackled warmly in the background. They had planned everything. Every detail had been carefully put together. But I had been left out. A sharp, bitter pain spread through my chest. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a mistake. They had deliberately excluded me. And they had been doing it for years. Shock gave way to anger. I gripped my phone tightly, my mother's text message still open on the screen. My entire life, I had convinced myself that I just wasn't the favorite. That I was different, quieter, more serious. And maybe that's why I didn't fit in. But now I saw the truth for what it was. They hadn't just forgotten about me. They had been lying to me. How many times had this happened? How many cancelled events were really just secret gatherings I wasn't invited to? How many times had they sat together at the dinner table, laughing and pretending I didn't exist? My breath came in sharp, shallow bursts as years of memories flooded back. The birthdays where my presence was an afterthought. The family trips I found out about through social media. The countless moments when I had convinced myself it was all in my head, that I was just being too sensitive. Whoa, not this time. My phone buzzed suddenly, snapping me back to reality. It was my mother. My stomach twisted into a knot as I stared at her name flashing on the screen. I hesitated. What would she say? Another lie. Another excuse. I took a deep breath and answered. Hi, sweetheart. How was your Christmas? I hope you had a nice, quiet day. We missed you so much. The sickly sweetness of her voice made my skin crawl. Really? I said, my voice steady despite the fury boiling inside me. Because according to Nina's Instagram, everyone had a wonderful time at Sophia's house. Everyone except me. Silence. Thick, suffocating silence. I could almost picture my mother's expression. The way her face would tighten, the way she'd scramble to come up with an excuse. Oh, well, Sophia planned it last minute, and, you're always so quiet at gatherings. We just thought. You thought what? Cut in sharply. That it would be better to lie to me. To make me spend Christmas alone while pretending that everyone else was doing the same. She sighed, exasperated. Isabella, don't be so dramatic. We were just trying to avoid any awkwardness. You know how Sophia wanted everything to be perfect. That was it. The final piece of the puzzle. All those cancelled plans. The excuses. The family photos I saw only after the fact. This wasn't a one-time thing. This was a pattern. A carefully orchestrated pattern of exclusion. I swallowed hard, my voice barely above a whisper. How many times? Another silence. Isabella, you're being oversensitive. I laughed, the sound hollow and bitter. Oversensitive. So I'm the problem now. Not the fact that you've been lying to me for years. That's not fair. My mother snapped. We love you both equally. It's just that Sophia puts in the effort to be part of the family. You're always so busy with work. I let out a sharp, humorless laugh. Busy with work? You mean busy helping you pay off your mortgage? Busy taking care of Dad after his surgery? That kind of busy. Her voice hardened. If you're going to be like this, maybe we should take some space. Call me when you're ready to be reasonable. Blick. The call ended. I sat there staring at my phone, my hands trembling. 32 years of memories suddenly came into focus, sharp and painful. Every excuse, every dismissal, every moment I had blamed myself. It had all been intentional. I wasn't the problem. I never had been. A slow, unfamiliar sense of clarity settled over me. I had spent my entire life bending over backward for a family that didn't want me. I had given them everything. My time, my energy, my love. Only to be treated like an afterthought. But not anymore. I reached for my laptop, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. They had spent years crafting their lies. Hiding behind false smiles and carefully curated social media posts. But they had forgotten one thing. I wasn't going to stay silent anymore. I sat in my quiet apartment, the only sound being the howling wind outside my window. The shock from my mother's phone call still hadn't worn off. The way she spoke to me, as if I was being unreasonable, as if I was the one in the wrong for discovering the truth. It made my skin crawl. I stared at the photos on my screen, my fingers gripping the edge of my desk so tightly my knuckles turned white. Every picture was a slap in the face, a cruel reminder that I had never truly been a part of this family. I had spent my entire life trying to prove my worth to them. I had done everything they wanted, given up my dreams, worked a stable job, even helped them financially. And yet this was my reward. I thought back to all the times before this. The gatherings I had been told were cancelled, the family trips I had only found out about through social media. I had told myself it was just bad timing, just a misunderstanding. But no. It had never been a coincidence. They had been doing this to me for years, and I had been too blind to see it. But this time I wasn't going to ignore the truth. I scrolled through my contacts, pausing on one name. Sophia. I tapped the call button. Unsurprisingly, she didn't answer the first time. Or the second. But on the third try, she finally picked up, her voice edged with irritation. Isabella. Why are you calling me so much? Do you have anything to say to me? My voice was calm, but underneath I was shaking. About what? About the Christmas dinner. The one you planned to be so perfect that you made sure I wasn't there. A brief silence. Oh, come on, Isabella, don't make a big deal out of this. It was just a small gathering put together at the last minute. Small. The entire family was there, all dressed in matching sweaters, with a fully decorated table and Mom's homemade cookies. You can lie to everyone else, but not to me. Sophia laughed, but it was strained. Isabella, you always overthink things. It was just a casual family dinner. And you know, you're not really the best at these kinds of events. Clenched my jaw. What exactly do you mean by that? Do you really want to know? Sophia's voice turned sharper. You've always been the odd one out. You're too serious, too rigid. We just wanted a fun Christmas without the tension you always bring. That's why we didn't invite you. I expected the words to cut deep, to hurt. But they didn't. For the first time I didn't feel pain. Felt relief. They never hated me. They just didn't care. I took a slow breath, then said, "Thank you for finally being honest." Then I hung up before she could say another word. The next morning my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Messages from my mother, my father, my aunts, my uncles. I didn't read them. But then one message caught my eye. Lillian Brooks. Family friend. Someone who used to manage my father's finances years ago. Isabella, I saw what happened on social media. There's something you need to know. Can we meet? I hesitated. Lillian wasn't someone who got involved in family drama. If she was reaching out, it had to be serious. I replied with a simple, "Where and when?" We met at a small cafe, the soft hum of Christmas music in the background. My heart was racing, though I didn't know why. When I arrived, Lillian was already there, clutching a brown envelope tightly in her hands. Her face was tense, troubled. "I've kept quiet for too long," she said, sliding the envelope toward me. Opened it. Inside were financial statements, legal documents, and bank transfers. And what they revealed made my blood turn to ice. My grandfather had left me an inheritance of nearly $300,000. Money I had never been told about. And my parents had stolen it. My hands trembled as I flipped through the pages. The proof was undeniable. My father had been the trustee of the inheritance. He was supposed to give me access when I turned 25. Instead, he had transferred every cent to Sophia's accounts. All those years I had struggled, working overtime to pay for my own education, drowning in student loans, while they had been sitting on my money. "They didn't just take your inheritance," Lillian continued. "They also sold properties that were supposed to be split between you and Sophia. They used the power of attorney they had you sign when you were 18. I looked up sharply. The document, they said, was for medical emergencies. Lillian nodded grimly. A wave of nausea rolled through me. They had stolen my future. I had worked tirelessly, sacrificing my time, my energy, helping them pay off their mortgage, supporting them when they needed me. And all along they had been robbing me blind. "I had to tell you," Lillian said, her voice gentle. "Especially after seeing how they're trying to turn everyone against you. They're trying to discredit you before you can discover the truth." I stared at the documents, my mind racing. Their escalating lies, their desperate attempts to paint me as difficult, their refusal to admit what they had done. It wasn't just about Christmas anymore. This was about years of manipulation. Years of them using me, draining me while pretending to be loving parents. Slowly I closed the envelope. My hands no longer shook. "Thank you, Lillian," I said, my voice steady. Because now I knew exactly what I had to do. They thought they could control me forever. That I would always be too scared, too desperate for their love to fight back. But they had underestimated me. I was done playing their game. And soon, they were going to find out exactly what happened when you pushed away the one person who had always been there for you. I left the cafe with my heart pounding, my grip tightening around the envelope that Lillian had given me. Every step I took felt heavier, as if I was crossing an invisible threshold, one that, once passed, would change everything forever. When I arrived home, I locked the door behind me and sat at my desk. In front of me lay the truth, a truth so horrifying that I could hardly believe I had been deceived for so many years. Nearly $300,000. That was the amount my grandfather had left for me in his will. And I had never known. I opened the envelope, scanning every line, every number with a growing sense of dread. Bank statements, suspicious transactions, forged signatures. A pattern emerged, one that made my blood turn cold. The money had been funneled from my trust fund into Sophia's accounts. Sophia, the golden child who had never once had to struggle for anything. My parents had stolen what was meant for me and handed it to her. I swallowed hard, my throat tightening. What had I done to deserve this? While I had worked late nights, barely making ends meet to pay for my education, Sophia had been traveling the world, calling herself an international yoga instructor. While I had been drowning in student loan debt, she had been living off of my inheritance. While I had sacrificed to help my parents pay off their mortgage, they had been spending money that was never theirs to begin with. A slow, nauseating realization settled over me. They had never needed my help. They had my money all along. My fingers curled into fists. I forced myself to keep reading, though every new discovery was like a fresh wound. Then I found something even worse. The properties my grandfather had left behind were gone. And according to the legal paperwork, I had agreed to sell them. My stomach dropped. I remembered it now. Years ago, when I had just turned 18, my parents had handed me a document, telling me it was a routine medical power of attorney form. They had insisted it was necessary in case of emergencies, so they could make decisions for me if something ever happened. I had trusted them. I had signed without question. And now, staring at the evidence, I saw what that document had really done. It had given them complete control over my financial assets. They had sold everything that was rightfully mine. I felt like I was going to be sick. This wasn't just betrayal. This was theft. My phone rang. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. A week ago I would have answered immediately. I would have wanted to hear her side, to understand. But now, I knew there was nothing she could say that would change the truth. I let it ring. Then came the text messages. Mom. Isabella, why are you ignoring me? Mom. We need to talk, sweetheart. Don't let your emotions cloud your judgment. Dad. Don't do anything reckless. Family is what matters most. Family. How dare they talk to me about family now? I gritted my teeth, my anger simmering just beneath the surface. They weren't reaching out because they cared. They were reaching out because they were afraid. They knew I had found out. And they knew I had the power to destroy them. I didn't hesitate for long. There was no world in which I could let this slide. I needed someone who could help me fight back. I needed a professional. I scrolled through my contacts until I found the name I was looking for. Samantha Hayes. A lawyer specializing in financial fraud. The phone barely rang twice before she picked up. Isabella. What can I do for you? I took a deep breath. I need your help. I've just uncovered evidence that my parents stole my inheritance and liquidated assets that belonged to me. Samantha's tone sharpened instantly. Tell me everything. For the next 10 minutes I laid it all out. Every forged document, every fraudulent transfer, every lie. I told her about the money, about the stolen properties, about how they had used me as a financial pawn my entire life. When I finished, Samantha was silent for a moment. Then she said, Isabella, this is a clear-cut case of financial exploitation. With the evidence you have, we can take legal action. We could even pursue criminal charges. I gripped the edge of my desk. Can we sue them? Not only can we sue them, but I strongly recommend that we do. If they've done this once, they'll do it again. People like this don't stop unless they're forced to. A deep, steadying breath filled my lungs. This was it. This was the moment I had to decide. Could let it go. Pretend it didn't happen. Continue being the fool they had always assumed I was. Or I could fight back. That night, I gathered every single piece of evidence I had. I traced every transaction, compiled every document, built a case so airtight that there would be no room for denials. I combed through old emails, text messages, anything that could further prove what they had done to me. By the time the sun rose, I knew one thing for certain. I was ready. They thought they could manipulate me forever. That I would always be too weak, too desperate for their approval to stand up for myself. But they had underestimated me. They had stolen my money. They had stolen my future. They had stolen my trust. But there was one thing they would never take from me again. My freedom. I picked up my phone and called Samantha. I want to move forward with the lawsuit. No negotiations. No mercy. On the other end of the line, Samantha's voice was firm, decisive. Good. They won't know what hit them. I wasn't shaking anymore. No more hesitation, no more doubt. The past few days had changed me forever. They thought I would stay silent, that I would be afraid, that I would bow my head just like I always had. They were wrong. On Saturday morning, I laid out 3 folders on my dining table, one for each of them. My father, my mother, and Sophia. Inside were all the documents proving their fraud. Bank statements, legal paperwork, undeniable evidence of my stolen inheritance. I had spent all night with Samantha Hayes, my lawyer, ensuring that everything was ready. They wanted to control me. To keep me as their obedient pawn forever. Not anymore. They arrived that afternoon, fake smiles plastered on their faces. I could see the confidence in their expressions, the assumption that I had come to my senses and was ready to apologize for overreacting. My mother spoke first. "Isabella, sweetheart, I'm so glad you've decided to talk. We can put all this behind us and find a way to move forward, right?" I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I slid the 3 folders across the table toward them. "Before anyone says anything, I suggest you read these." The air in the room shifted. My father frowned as he opened his folder. My mother flipped through the pages quickly, her face draining of color with every passing second. Sophia sat frozen, staring at the numbers, the transactions she couldn't deny. "This is the proof that you stole my inheritance, sold my rightful assets, and forged my signature. Now you have 2 choices." I locked eyes with each of them, my voice steady and cold. "First option. You sign the agreement, return every remaining dollar, and sign a confession admitting the truth. If you do that, I won't press charges." Paused, letting them absorb my words. "Second option. I let the courts handle it. And I will not hold back." Silence. Thick, suffocating silence. My mother was the first to speak, her voice trembling. "Isabella, do you really want to destroy your own family?" I let out a hollow laugh. "What family? A family that lies, betrays, and steals from their own. That's not family." My father shut his folder with a heavy thud. "You can't do this. You'll regret it." I crossed my arms. "Try me." I gave them 48 hours to decide. But I already knew what they would do. 2 days later, they didn't sign the agreement. Instead, they tried to cover their tracks. Closing accounts, deleting transactions, even reaching out to Lillian Brooks, trying to pressure her into retracting her statement. They thought they could erase the truth. But they had forgotten one thing. I am an accountant. I had tracked every cent they stole. I had all the evidence, and I wasn't fighting alone. On Monday morning, I officially filed my lawsuit. That afternoon, the police arrived at their house with search warrants. I wasn't there to see it, but I heard what happened. My mother broke down in tears, my father raged, and Sophia stood there in stunned silence as they realized the full weight of what they had done. Their lies had finally caught up to them. Over the following days, news of the lawsuit spread quickly. Relatives who once dismissed me suddenly went quiet. Those who called me too sensitive had nothing to say now. Sophia sent me a long message, swearing that she had no idea about the money. I didn't reply. My mother called repeatedly, begging me to drop the case. I didn't pick up. My father sent me an email filled with anger, accusing me of destroying the family, and warning that I would regret this. I sent him back one sentence. "You did this to yourselves." 1 year later, I stood by the window of my new apartment, watching the snow fall softly over the city. I had won the case. My parents were forced to return every penny they had left, along with damages. Sophia lost everything, her lavish lifestyle, her assets, because they had all been paid for with stolen money. Of course, none of them spoke to me anymore. But the strange thing was, I didn't miss them. I used to believe that family was everything, that nothing could replace them. But I had learned something important. Family isn't defined by blood. It's defined by respect, love, and trust. They once thought I couldn't survive without them. But now, for the first time in my life, I was truly free. I once thought that a part of me would feel regret when things reached this point. But as I stood by the window of my lawyer's office, watching the police knock on my parents' door with a search warrant, I felt only one thing: relief. They could have stopped this. They could have signed the agreement, returned what they stole, and kept a shred of dignity. But instead of admitting their wrongdoing, they chose to fight. They chose to deny, to manipulate, to paint me as the villain. And now they were paying the price. The first day of the legal battle, I entered the conference room alongside Samantha Hayes, my attorney, and her legal team. Across from us sat my parents' lawyers, a group that looked tense despite their forced confidence. My father sat in the center, his face unreadable. His eyes cold as if I were nothing but a stranger. My mother sat beside him, her eyes red and teary, but I knew the truth. Those weren't tears of guilt. They were tears of someone who had been caught. Sophia wasn't there. Maybe she was too ashamed to face what was happening. Samantha spoke first, her voice firm and unwavering. We have sufficient evidence to charge you with financial fraud, embezzlement, and forgery. However, before we take this to court, my client is offering one final chance. She slid a new settlement across the table. Either return the remaining funds and sign a written confession, or we proceed with the lawsuit. I remained silent, watching the expressions shift across their faces. My father didn't even glance at the papers. He pushed them aside with a scoff. You think you have the power to destroy this family? You, an ungrateful daughter. I met his gaze without flinching. No. This family destroyed itself long ago. My mother began crying, her voice shaking as she pleaded. Sweetheart, we're family. Don't let this go too far. I'm begging you. I inhaled deeply before answering. You're not sorry for what you did. You're only sorry that I found out. I stood up. I'll see you in court. In the following days, the scandal surrounding my family exploded. News of the lawsuit spread quickly, and as legal documents were made public, everyone saw the truth. They had not just betrayed me but also broken the law. My father was suspended from his job. My mother was removed from the charity boards she had once proudly served on. Sophia, the golden child of the family, lost everything: the luxurious lifestyle, the endless funds, because it had all been built on stolen money. Some relatives turned their backs on me, accusing me of being cruel. But others finally saw what had really happened. Emily Carter, a cousin who had always kept her distance, called me. I had no idea they did this to you. I'm sorry for not standing up for you sooner. I didn't need apologies from those who had chosen silence. But I also held no resentment. All I wanted was justice. The day of the trial, I walked into the courtroom with my head held high. My parents sat on the opposite side, looking drained, the arrogance they once carried completely gone. The judge asked if they had anything to say. My father spoke first. This is all just a misunderstanding. We never meant to hurt our daughter. This should have never gone to court. It's a private family matter. I looked him in the eye, then calmly replied. If it was just a small misunderstanding, why did you forge my signature? No answer. In the end, the ruling was in my favor. They were ordered to return what remained of my inheritance, along with additional damages. Sophia, unable to afford her expenses without stolen money, was forced to find an actual job for the first time in her life. They had lost everything. But I didn't feel triumphant. I only felt peace. A year later, I stood on the balcony of my new apartment, taking in the crisp morning air. My life had completely changed. I had new friends, colleagues who respected me, and for the first time ever, I was free from the people who had tried to control me. My phone buzzed. An unread message from my mother. Isabella, I miss you. I didn't reply. They had no power over me anymore. They once believed that I would always need them, that I would never be able to live without their acceptance. But now I had learned the most important lesson of all. Family isn't defined by blood. Family is made up of the people who respect, love, and never take advantage of you. And at last, I had found my true family. The snow fell in soft, delicate flakes outside my window, covering the streets of Denver in a quiet white blanket. A year ago, I would have never imagined myself here, standing in my own apartment in a new city, with an entirely different life. For the first time, I didn't feel trapped. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was holding my breath, waiting for the next disappointment, the next betrayal, the next time I'd be pushed aside. For the first time, I was free. I wrapped my hands around a warm mug of coffee, letting the steam rise to my face as I stared out at the city below. This was my home now. Not the house I had grown up in, not the suffocating presence of people who claimed to be my family, but this, a space that was truly mine. No more waiting for approval that would never come. No more sacrificing myself for people who never saw my worth. No more being the outsider in my own life. Moving to Denver hadn't been easy. Leaving behind everything I had ever known felt like stepping off a cliff, into the unknown. I had spent my entire life trying to be what my family wanted me to be. Obedient, accommodating, invisible. Walking away from them felt unnatural at first, like shedding a skin that had grown too tight but was still all I had ever known. But the moment I drove out of that town for the last time, I felt something lift off my chest. I wasn't running away. I was finally choosing myself. In the beginning there were moments of doubt. The loneliness would creep in at night, whispering that maybe I had made the wrong choice. That maybe I should have just let things go, that maybe family was better than nothing. But every time that doubt surfaced, I reminded myself of the truth. The people I left behind were never really my family. Family was not the people who manipulated you, who stole from you, who made you feel like you were never enough. Family was the people who supported you, who celebrated you, who stood by you without conditions. And slowly, I began to build a new one. At work, I no longer felt overlooked. My skills were recognized, my ideas valued. It was a strange feeling at first. To be seen, to be appreciated, to be treated with respect. I made new friends. People who didn't know me as the quiet one or the outsider, but simply as Isabella. People who saw my strengths, not my silence. People who chose me not because they had to, but because they wanted to. And for the first time I let them in. I had spent years convincing myself that I didn't need anyone, that I was fine being alone. But what I had needed all along wasn't solitude. It was the right people. It was the realization that I deserved better. One afternoon, as I was sorting through some old boxes, I found something unexpected. An old photo album. It had been given to me by Lillian Brooks before I left town, something she had come across while cleaning out her office. I flipped it open and was immediately greeted by a familiar face. My grandfather. There he was, smiling beside me, a fishing pole in hand, laughter frozen in time. I traced my fingers over the image, feeling a lump rise in my throat. "He always said you were the strong one," Lillian had told me when she handed me the album. "He knew they favored Sophia, but he believed you would overcome it." I hadn't understood it at the time, but now I did. My grandfather had tried to protect me, in the only way he knew how. Through that inheritance, through his quiet support, through the small moments where he had made me feel like I mattered. And even though they had stolen so much from me, they could never take that away. I closed the album, pressing it against my chest. I had spent so long mourning the family I never truly had. But now I was done grieving. A few days later, my phone buzzed with a new message. I almost ignored it until I saw the name. Sophia. I stared at the screen, debating whether to open it. Curiosity won. "I guess you won, huh? Hope you're happy. Mom and Dad won't even talk to me anymore. You ruined everything." I let out a slow breath. A year ago, that message would have devastated me. But now, I simply put my phone down, feeling nothing at all. Because I hadn't ruined anything. They had done that to themselves. And I'd finally saved myself. That night, I walked through the snowy streets of Denver, feeling the cold air bite at my skin, but I didn't mind. For the first time, I wasn't carrying the weight of my past on my shoulders. For the first time, I wasn't looking back. I was looking forward. I had built a new life. Real life. A life where I was enough just as I was. I had spent years trying to be the daughter they wanted. Trying to earn their love. Trying to belong. But I had belonged to myself all along. And that was more than enough.